The album begins with the song Consumed, which to me sort of lays out the mission statement here for the album right away. It begins with this little sort of weird, spirally bass and drum pattern combined with two guitars playing different guitar lines, which actually are a really great example of counterpoint in music. Right away, some genius stuff here. It's a very ominous sounding intro, which quickly evolves into the rolling momentum of the main parts of the song here. With a drum roll, the band then switches keys quickly to F minor and begins this really cool 16th note section where Steve, the bassist, Shannon, guitarist, and Richard, the drummer, are all just sort of pedaling these root notes, these 16th root notes, while Chuck plays this really cool riff on the F, G string, and standard tuning. It is a very interesting riff, and combined with Richard Christie's double bass and what sounds like he's playing like ride and a hi-hat, you know, like ting 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 right at the top, it just gives this section such like a triumphant momentum to it. Right away, it sort of separates itself from a Death song, as you would almost never hear a Death song having a riff played on a pedaled F string. Great stuff. It's one of my favorite parts on the album, and like I said, it really just sort of lays it all out. Like here, it's different than Death, but it's still Chuck Schuldiner, you know what I mean? Now, Tim Aymar joins them and just gives it tons of socks. I bet they knew this was going to be the first vocals heard on the new Chuck project here, Control Denied, so I'm sure this is a really important line to nail, and Tim absolutely does. I know a lot of people who don't really like this type of higher falsetto singing, but Tim Aymar just has such grit and power behind his voice that when he gets up into that higher register, oh man, I just love the way he sounds. I actually wish he sang more in that register rather than his lower voice, but you know, what can you do? Tim joining up here gives even more momentum and power. Truly, this opening verse feels like a powerful freight train moving at 100 miles an hour. Truly just definitive statement stuff here. Fantastic. I will say though, these opening verses are easily the high point of the song for me, and there seems to be on this album one or two parts in every song where everything just comes together and it all opens up into this absolutely glorious Chuck version of power prog or US power metal, whatever you want to call it. But we'll talk more about that phenomenon as we go on here. Now, after this verse, the song then violently changes keys. Again, this is a common theme with Death and goes forward to Control Denied into good old D minor. Some more fast chugging and meandering before everything drops out, and we are treated to another common trend here, which Chuck likes to do. Again, similar to what's on The Sound of Perseverance, right? These huge and sudden dynamic shifts. Which, let's be honest here, right? There are quite a few of those on Symbolic and The Sound of Perseverance, but here on The Fragile Art of Existence, which from here on in, I will just shorten to The Fragile Art. Here, these huge dynamic shifts seem to be the rule, and something which Chuck was maybe even leaning into more in his songwriting here. It works sometimes. Here, everything drops out and we get these huge pounding toms from Richard, as well as a really great and pained sounding solo from Shannon Ham. Shannon also played on The Sound of Perseverance and remained with Chuck as he moved forward into Control Denied. I love Shannon's playing on The Sound of Perseverance, especially his solo on Story to Tell, just fantastic. And his work on The Fragile Art here is equally as good, and you know, every time he's asked to deliver, he absolutely does. Yeah, great stuff, great player. This section of the song is all about building tension before the chorus, and it does a really great job. I especially love how Tim Aymar controls his voice here. Just sounds really fantastic, and I love how the band explodes out from this section. Also notable here is that there is another key change. This time the band goes from D minor-ish to G harmonic minor. And I love how that last big power chord the band plays is that F sharp power chord, which really builds this tension even higher until it finally resolves up that one semitone up to G. chorus here is pretty good, not my favorite though, and I wish he would have delivered this chorus in that same sort of high energy falsetto scream from earlier. Rather, Tim sings this in his lower register. While his lower register is cool, I think the more intense, higher pitched falsetto screaming would have really climaxed the song well here, but Chuck writes all the vocal lines and you can hear them all in the demo, so I think he's just sort of singing what was written more or less. Regardless, here in the chorus, we get some really, really fantastic playing from the GOAT, Steve DiGiorgio. And don't worry, we will talk more about him later. Don't worry at all. And just as we get some momentum going and movement back into the song again, the bottom falls out once more. I mean, like, this is prog after all, but it's too much.
Do you feel the pain that I feel? The pain.
Nice little riff by Chuck combined with these huge hits and great singing by Tim. I like this section. I just wish this song didn't feel so stop-starty, right? It really robs the song of flow, but hey, you know, maybe that was the point. This is prog. And I have to say though, in this bridge right away in the first song, we get a contender for riff of the album, which of course is this one. What an absolutely bomb-ass riff combined with some seriously kick-ass drumming from Richard Christie. Guy is also a beast here, man. Tim Aymar does this chant like Oz over the top. It's just like a little fantastic section during this bridge, which does such a great job of picking up the pace and momentum once again from when they dropped it all out. Now, in typical Chuck Schuldiner fashion, these songs use the quote, death song structure, end quote, which I made an entire video about if you want to check that out. And this album follows it to a T, maybe to a fault, honestly, as most sections are simply played the exact same way as before, sometimes with the same lyrics too. Now, for Death, that works, right? It's mostly about the energy and intensity of the music, but here on the Fragile Art, you know, it is a progressive metal album, right? I would have appreciated some progression, some changes or switch ups in these sections which get repeated, you know, maybe just a different drum beat or something, but I don't know, maybe there wasn't time for that, maybe Chuck didn't want it. Anyways, it makes my job here easier as the songs essentially just repeat after the bridges, so, you know, what can you say? I will say on the last chorus here, I love the end with this huge shredding Chuck solo. Great stuff, and it really leaves the song off on a high note. Now, lyrically consumed, it seems to be about some sort of dream or ambition consuming a person, and not in like an ideal positive way. Rather, it's about being consumed by something in a very messy human way. You know what I mean? Quote, once I was free, but now I am trapped. Once I was trapped, but now I am free, end quote. These two lines here seem to be kind of redundant at first glance and maybe a bit pedantic, but to me, it speaks to being free to pursue your dream, but now you are trapped by this desire to achieve the dream, right? The song and many others seem to be deeply personal and self-referential to Chuck's life and journey through and with the music industry as a whole. So this is how I interpret this song here. And almost certainly, I think the song is referring to Control Denied, the band itself, right? As he was once trapped by death, but now he is free. But now he is simply trapped by Control Denied, quote, consumed, escaped through dreams, consumed, trapped by dreams, consumed forever it seems. Do you feel the pain that I feel, the pain that lives inside? Do you wear the chains that I wear, the ones that rub me raw? End quote. Again, the chorus lyrics sort of echo this idealization of escaping only to find yourself trapped once again by the thing you were chasing. He sort of repeated that theme there again in the chorus. He even asks in the bridge if you can feel the same pain he does being consumed and rubbed raw by this dream. To me, this is like a very, very interesting song lyrically to put first as well. It's almost like he is saying he is free to do something, but now he's trapped by that, and here we are. I don't know, really cool song, great introspective lyrics, with maybe a few kind of clumsy interruptions to the flow of the song. Overall, pretty good. I'll give Consumed an 8 out of 10. So, well, hello, my friends. We'll meet again. It has been a while. Where should we begin? This video I've been making for a long time, too long, in fact, and I actually decided to split it up as it would have been way too long otherwise. This video will be all about the music with some supporting details about the band, and then in a follow-up video, which will also be long, I will go into the entire story and timeline of how Control Denied came to be. Make sure you subscribe to see that second video where I'll fill in all the gaps if you're curious. Now, Control Denied, the infamous last band, the last album by Chuck Schuldiner he would ever appear on. I'll get into that in the other video, but this album here, we get to enjoy what was a long time coming for him. And to me, if you are a fan of death metal, and by extension, Death the Band, coming into this album, you probably won't like it all that much, honestly. This album is pretty solidly symbolic, a little bit of Sound of Perseverance riffage, which, let's be honest, guys, didn't have that much original death metal DNA left in it. However, if you are much more of a fan of the later death stuff, or power, or progressive metal, coming to this album, I think you will like it a whole lot more. Now, me, I fall into the later camp, right? I love power prog, I love that stuff, but the hordes of death fans coming to this album being left disappointed has surely tainted the reputation of this album somewhat, and I fundamentally disagree that this is, an album, if you like death metal, you should like, right? I don't think so at all. I actually think this is a great power prog metal, and I would put this up there with some of the best of the 90s US power metal, right? Now, whether you believe in fate, synchronicity, anything like that, you cannot argue the very eerie and prophetic nature of this album. And actually, all of these songs and the album title were finished before Chuck was diagnosed with brain cancer, which would happen during the mixing of this album. And of course, what an absolutely terrible course of events that would come after that. But to me, the whole, terrible circumstances surrounding the recording and making of this album make it even more intriguing, and the lyrics even more poignant and powerful. It really, really enforces this idea of a fragile art of existence in a way that's palpable, right? The sense of impending loss sort of permeates the album, but not in a sad and mournful way. Rather, I find this album to be very strangely beautiful and full of courage in spite of the face that we are fragile beings, right? And I know a lot of people see this as a Sound of Perseverance Part 2, and while it does share 3/5 of the members, production style and producer to that album, to me, lyrically and musically, this is much more like a Symbolic Part 2, and I believe it was written right after Symbolic as well, right? The production of this album, specifically on the drums and bass, is just so good. Jim Morris really, really did a wonderful job with the rhythm section here. It's just so wonderfully tight and fat sounding. Really, really highlights Steve DiGiorgio's playing in probably the best way he's ever sounded, honestly. But enough pre-ramble here. Let's keep moving on with the music. So second up would be the song Breaking the Broken, which years later would get a kind of strange music video made for it. I don't know. I don't get the choice. I don't agree with this song being chosen for that either, but whatever. Breaking the Broken starts with this ominous chanting intro, which almost sounds like the section before the chorus in Consumed, just a little bit faster. We get a nice ambient guitar lead before we break out into the meat of the song proper. Now here we get this really, really groovy and heavy riff. I think this album actually takes a lot of influence from some of the 90s groove metal, and Chuck incorporated it very nicely into his riff repertoire. Maybe with the best example being this one here. I hear a lot of Anacrusis in here, maybe some Prong. Some really stomping grooves, which the GOAT, Steve DiGiorgio, gives ample space for him to stretch his fingers. Now, Steve DiGiorgio has long been associated with death, going all the way back to 1991's Human and Individual Thought Patterns. To me, he has always been one of my absolute favorite bassists, just so creative with his fretless playing, yet able to reel it back in for very specific moments as a very, very tasteful player. And here on the Fragile Art, it may just be my favorite Steve DiGiorgio performance ever. Again, like I said earlier, huge credit to Jim Morris for mixing him in properly here. And Steve DiGiorgio did not have a lot of time to prepare for this album. He actually did some demos for Symbolic and the Sound of Perseverance, but the schedules weren't able to line up. But here this time at the 11th hour, as Chuck is being treated for cancer, he called up Steve. He said he didn't like the original bassist Scott Clenderon's bass parts, and Steve came and laid down one of the best bass performances in metal ever, in my opinion, in very, very short order. Absolutely remarkable stuff by Steve DiGiorgio. He absolutely just kills it on this album. And so many sections on this album feature such great bass playing, especially this song here. The The band then moves on to the next section, getting the Tim Amar falsetto voice again, which sounds especially great over top of the rolling bass, harmonized guitars, and this sort of really slinky and slidey bass playing. I guess maybe you would consider this the chorus, as we get the title of the song in this section as well. Again, like I said, Death's song structure doesn't really necessarily have a defined chorus, I guess, right? And then we move on to what I would describe as the quote-unquote prog section of the song. Sort of this obtuse stop-start diddle section. I get this is sort of like the Dream Theater worship of the album. It is pretty interesting, I guess, but I feel like this would have been cooler as a bridge, as hearing this twice in the song being played the same way is sort of like a cheap way to lengthen the song. I don't know, and the fact that, again, they play it like the same way twice, it just feels kind of lazy to me. Regardless, really, really cool playing by Richard and Steve here again. Suddenly, the band then explodes out of the section with one of my favorite riffs of the album. Such a flying fast riff that it just absolutely rips, especially when compared to that very weird and stop-starty section that was right before it, right? All these songs do a great job of building up tension and releasing it, and this song is a great example of it. Decent chorus melody from the vocals here, and the riffage underneath it has enough gas to make me enjoy it.
When it's all said and done, what is left to really say?
Great stuff here in this chorus, or whatever you want to call it. The band follows up with then like a pretty typical Chuck Schuldiner bridge, right? Big change in dynamics, rhythm guitars, and drums designed to give the solo room to breathe. If you listen, a lot of Death solos are like this. And instrumentally, Breaking the Broken feels the most like a Death song to me, right? Nice, evil, crunchy intervals, with most of the song being played in D Phrygian. Good, fast riff sections. You know, pretty damn good song. That's probably why they chose it to be the single. It's the most Death sounding, but to me, this is sort of the most disappointing vocally, I guess. I don't know. Feels like he could have done more, but, you know, he's just singing what Chuck wanted to be sung, I suppose, right? So I can't fault Tim Imar for this. Now, lyrically, this actually is a very, very interesting song. One of several songs here which make direct reference to the Sound of Perseverance. And here on Breaking the Broken, it actually just takes lines from the song Spirit Crusher. Quote, "You speak in killing words, the kind that crush and kill. No mercy, your pleasure to taste the blood you bled." End quote. Now, the lines from Spirit Crusher are just like a little bit different, but basically the same. To me, this ties the song directly to the meaning of Spirit Crusher, which I made a whole video about, by the way, which you can go check out. But Spirit Crusher essentially is personifying depression into a monster, something you can name and attack, right? And to me, that's what Breaking the Broken is saying as well. Quote, "I saw you, you saw me, you hid your fangs so well. I should have known better, but it is hard to tell. In beauty, the evil is waiting for possession. Deep inside, reflections, just a glimpse away." End quote. Sort of another related metaphor to Spirit Crusher here, right? When Spirit Crusher said, "Human at sight, monster at heart." Basically, Chuck is saying that this monster, again, hides in plain sight. It hides its fangs so well. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a dream, maybe it's a job. It is something which on the outside promises happiness, enjoyment, fulfillment, only for it to shed its skin, reveal its fangs, and feast upon you, right? It feeds on plain sight and breaks the broken. Quote, "Your faithful servants, they bow to you. Together, they're breaking the broken." End quote. And to me, this line really seals the deal again. I think maybe this was like another self-referential allusion to the music industry, maybe Death as a band as a whole, right? Infamously, Chuck had many, many problems with managers, tour directors, musicians, record labels, and even bandmates. And to me, it seems here that he is saying that the Spirit Crusher, depression, mental illness, greed, you know, whatever, it absorbs people and adds it to its servant army. And it's all part of like the same force. And together they spread out and continue breaking the broken, feeding off them. Great stuff. Chuck always has great and thought-provoking lyrics. And I do actually quite enjoy the references to Spirit Crusher. I think it's kind of clever. To me, I will give the song another 8 out of 10. I love and mostly enjoy everything about this song. Again, except the vocal melodies, I just find them to be a bit weak. Could have been more exciting, but here we are. Now, the vocalist search for Control Denied is another story for the follow-up, which we'll get into that there. Went through a couple guys, but Chuck went through several singers, or at least ideas for singers. On some of the demos that are out there on the deluxe editions, you can find Chuck himself doing the clean singing. Shannon Hamm actually trying it out. And even it was rumored that Warrell Dane from Nevermore would possibly be the guy to sing. In the end, though, it was Tim Aymar of Psycho Scream and later of Pharaoh who got the job. I love Tim's voice here, and ironically, he sounds a lot like Warrell Dane in some places. But I think most importantly to Chuck, he sounds a lot like the clean vocal demos which Chuck did himself. In fact, I would say that Tim and Chuck have very, very similar clean singing voices and vocal styles, and Tim basically just sort of sung the Chuck lines exactly as written out before, which is kind of impressive, honestly. Which either could be viewed negatively or positively, right? I think Chuck's demos are all good, except he does write some clean vocal lines a little bit strangely. Almost like a little bit too prog. I don't know. It feels more like guitar leads and vocal melodies sometimes. And regardless, I do think that Tim Aymar killed it here. I mentioned it earlier, but I really, really, really love his falsetto, higher screaming, you know, Rob Halford voice. And I would love to have seen what Chuck and Tim could have done together in the future with Tim sort of, you know, going in his own way and working with his own voice. But Amor Fati, right? However, the next song up, Expect the Unexpected, may just be my favorite Tim Aymar vocal performance on this record here. So let's get into that song now. Now, Expect the Unexpected starts out right away with the riffs. Love it. Love that shit. No convoluted intro, just straight to the riffs. Great stuff. I always love and appreciate that. You know, nice big build-up before entering into this great riffage too. Very, very short and sweet. This first verse combined with some really great drumming for Richard Christie. It really feels like it is sort of like half galloping before running again. I guess in a way it sort of fits the theme of the song, right? You expect it to be this galloping riff before it suddenly changes right in the middle of the phrase. Cool stuff. Maybe I'm reaching. What can you do? This song seems to be a little bit more in Tim Aymar's wheelhouse here, and he sounds fantastic on it. His vocals in the verse are particularly venomous, you know, sitting right in the lower range of his falsetto. A really, really enjoyable first minute or two of the song.
The element of surprise.
But the onslaught does not actually end there. It continues on. We get an ever so typical sudden riff change, and the band slows the tempo ever so slightly, but different from the previous two songs whose sudden changes and dynamic shifts sort of, I guess, derail the song. Here it works perfectly. Just enough to make it unexpected. But not so much of a big shift as to halt the flow and momentum of the song completely. Really, really simple guitar riffage here, which again lets Steve and Richard really shine. Chuck gave lots of room to both those guys to really just go crazy. And it just underscores to me how great of a bassist Steve DiGiorgio it is. And honestly, it makes me sad that life and other band commitments prevented him from playing on Symbolic and The Sound of Perseverance. Oh, what could have been, boys, what could have been. Tim Aymar does some great singing here as well, going from the nearly very bottom of his range right up to the very top in this great line of screaming into the mind. Forgive me for that. Which, another fantastic chorus here on this song. It continues the momentum and flow, and is one of those moments that I mentioned earlier where the album and the song really just opens up and the vision behind it all becomes crystal clear. The album locks in to get some Zoomer speak in.
Whatever what can I see? Expect the unexpected.
We get some great harmonized singing by Tim here. Man, just great stuff. Love this. Which then moves into maybe one of the best riffs on the album. Yeah, you know, fuck it. Riff of the album right here. Just fantastic, beautiful riff here. And when the rest of the band joins in with Chuck playing that riff, chef's kiss. Just another one of those moments where this album just really opens up. This song is just so good, filled with all of these. But alas, this is prog metal, so we must move on short order. We get another great solo from Shannon, which is paired with this cool, heavy chugging pattern, which also features what sounds like a bass wah effect from Steve. Either way, the song really nails down the sort of expect the unexpected title with this section, but honestly, I love it. The bridge is the right time to experiment, and I love this, and I love Shannon's solo as well here. Which followed by that, we get a really crazy Sound of Perseverance, crazy jump in tempo by jumping straight into the 190 BPM D minor riffage. Love it, another great riff. The song's just packed full of them. Great fast pummeling drumming, and to top it all off, maybe one of my favorite Tim Aymar vocal moments on this entire project with that quote, "I never listen learned." Oh man, just fantastic stuff from Tim here. We then get another tempo change back down again as we go to Chuck's solo, which here they go to F sharp, which is the major third of D. So maybe it sounds like they're teasing both G harmonic minor and D major, which is certainly an interesting set of chords to solo over top of. Really sounds different, right? With another drastic tempo change, really just a very stark change there.
Voice.
The song then repeats, like, ironically is expected to go back into the intro riff for fade out. Nice stuff to bring that intro riff back at the end too. Yeah, great. Now lyrically, Expect the Unexpected just kind of says what it's about in the title, but this is like the first case of that weird sort of synchronicity with his cancer, you know what I mean? Quote, "I'm holding on with all my might to this ride we call life," end quote. It's a great example, and to make this more even eerie and poignant, the 1996 demo with Chuck on vocals features the exact same set of lyrics. Really, really chilling words here because of that. Quote, "And when life seems to be complete, it comes and knocks us off our feet. The elemental surprise, the avengeful attack," end quote. You know, I can only imagine hearing these vocal lines in the mixing booth after the cancer diagnosis. Like, it is just so chilling, right? But ask anyone, and this is just gospel truth, when you think you have things finally figured out, that is when life really comes and hits you hardest. You know what I mean? Happened to me, seemed to happen to Chuck here too. And right, you see Chuck with his brand new shiny prog metal band, the one he'd been dreaming of for a while. Felt like he'd figured things out, only for life to send a knockout blow to him in just such a tragic way. All in all, Expect the Unexpected is one of the first songs which really seems to make all these various elements of prog, power metal, and like death riffage kind of work all together. And several times, like I mentioned, the song really like opens up and I see like the choir of angels walks in. It's like, oh, and it's like, yeah, this is what I want, right? Combined with the eerie and chilling foreshadowing lyrics, which not only relate to Chuck's situation, but honestly have great universal appeal, makes this song just absolutely fantastic. 10 out of 10, unexpectedly, for Expect the Unexpected. What a banger. Now, Richard Christy is the man on the sticks for this album, and he carries on his astounding performance that he gave on The Sound of Perseverance to The Fragile Art here. On these two albums in particular, he plays this incredibly like fluid and loose style of drumming, and I actually think The Sound of Perseverance might be my favorite drum performance of all time. It's just so good. I don't know, he just like flows over the kit. After Control Denied, Richard would find himself in a few other bands, notably Iced Earth and Charred Walls of the Damned. And funny enough, Richard Christy was also a frequent guest on the Howard Stern Show, which, you know, I feel like I was a little bit too young and I never really listened to it up here in Canada, but I know a lot of people really, really enjoy that show. And of course, more on him in the follow-up video, so make sure you like, comment, subscribe. His playing on The Fragile Art here is a bit toned down compared to The Sound of Perseverance. That drumming is very just frantic and crazy, right? But, you know, the music isn't as fast or as intense on that record either, so that's to be expected. But here he still manages to play some of the most interesting and compelling drum parts in all of metal. Similar to another great death drummer, Gene Hoglan, he uses a lot of cymbals in his playing, right? Not just crashes, you know, but he's hitting splashes, chinas, double ride patterns, you know, hi-hat flutters, just so much cool shit that he plays, right? Gene Hoglan plays like a powerhouse robot, whereas to me, Richard simply spills himself over the kit in the least weird way sounding possible. And no better example of this than the intro to the next song, What If? Which begins to this really sort of like strange bass tapping intro. The guitars then join in briefly, adding some structure to the whole thing. Before the song starts proper. Now, What If? To me, I love this song. Absolute banger, but I can't help but feel that this strange and somewhat weird intro riff detracts from the song slightly. Maybe an example of just prog for the sake of prog, but anyways, it is still cool, you know, and makes the verse riff hit even harder coming off of that like crazy progness, right? Here again, another contender for riff of the album, and one of those times where the album completely opens up and clicks for me. So good, man. Absolutely love this verse. Great, fantastic singing and harmony work from Tim here again. Just such a great head-bobbing, groovy riff, which again contrasts greatly from the obtuse intro section, which makes it sound even more locked in together, right? And I really love how the guitar plays the vocal melody right before the vocals start. Nice little touch.
So there they stood on a mountain ravine.
Easy, one of my favorite sections of the whole album. Yeah, excellent shit. And then they move on briefly to like a short pre-chorus, which these things become like a little bit more prog. At least some of the lyrics relate to the guitars as they play these short little guitar diddles sounding like a twinkling star. Again, cool stuff. You know, what if they saw burning stars, I guess? Before they move on to the chorus, which honestly is really, really heavy with those syncopated chugs and kick drums.
What if when they saw burning stars?
One of the few times in the album where the band, you know, switches back and forth between different parts as well, right? Moving back and forth between these two sections. Very, very unique here. Great subtle bass fills by Steve as well. Pretty good and catchy chorus here. I found myself singing along to the song maybe the most of any of the album here too. It's also very short and sweet.
Just theories of time. What if when they saw burning stars?
The song carries a ton of momentum and flow throughout it. Maybe the best of any song on the album here. And momentum and flow is very, very important to me. I'm not sure if it is for you, but you know. We then get another great solo from Chuck. Again, lots of room is given to the solos, which is very typical for Chuck's songs. And this is my favorite Chuck solo on the album, and I absolutely love those little 16th note flourishes the band does underneath it. Very, very cool, prog, groovy, great shit there. A short drum break from Richard brings us into Shannon's solo, which is underscored by a really, really great under solo riff, you know. Under solo riff, very, very underrated part of a song, and this is a great one. Shannon does a lot of cool self-harmonizing, which sounds a little bit like something like Andy the Rock would have done on Individual Thought Patterns. Really, really sick. And then the song then repeats like normal. Absolute banger. Shortest song on the album, but just so sweet. Love it. Now, lyrically, What If is maybe the most nebulous and interesting out there songs lyrically here. Really quite different from the rest of the album. Quote, what if when they saw burning stars, they thought it was a gift from beyond far? Look close between the lines. Beyond what you believe to be real, are they just theories of time? End quote. Now, you know, shooting stars have forever been seen as omens or messages from beyond, you know, comets, meteors, whatever you want to call them, right? And even in modern times, the Tunguska event, which was a meteor airburst in Siberia in the early 20th century, literally generated a new religion, as in the sight and explosion was so powerful and grandiose grandiose that the people who witnessed it, the Tunguska people, believed it was a message from God. You know, I'm completely paraphrasing it here. Go look up the story, the Tunguska event. Fascinating story. Randall Carlson has a great video on it here, but I'm not sure. Was he aware of this stuff here? Was he talking about that? I'm not too sure, right? Chuck is referencing shooting stars or comets and how people believed it was a message from beyond. This is like a really interesting and esoteric topic. Quote, so there they stood on a mountain revealing their wisdom while taking in all that earth had to give to them and what it had, secrets that shadows of time conceal, end quote. Now, my best guess at interpreting what Chuck is trying to say here, and trust me, I've poured over all the interviews I could find, and none sadly mention this song, is that the natural world and all its beauty and wonder, you know, it leads humans to religious conclusions. To witness something of such majestic grandeur, like a burning star, would inspire us with rousing feelings. So, quote, we should take a close look at infinity, end quote, seems to him be saying that to understand our place within the world, we need to look outwards to the stars rather than inwards with psychology. I guess. I don't know. Great stuff. Easy, one of my favorites on the records. This is another 10 out of 10. Absolute bang. When the Link Becomes Missing is the 5th song here, and this song starts out with this really, really, really powerful Phrygian riff. I must say, I really, really, really like the guitar tone on this album. It is like a little bit less shiny and polished and fiery than on The Sound of Perseverance, and it has this sort of high-end fizz that I think adds a lot of extra edge to it thing too. It makes the whole thing sound a bit more aggressive as well, but it's definitely a little bit more toned down from The Sound of Perseverance, and that works well. Right off the bat with the riffs, and Steve DiGiorgio once again using all the pauses in the guitar riffs to do some sick bass fills. Always love Steve for that. No one does it better. I'll glaze him the end of time. I don't give a shit. Tim Aymar sounds really powerful in this song, although I do find the weird background warbly effect that they use on some of his vocal lines here to be kind of odd. It was 1999 though, and people were doing weird stuff like that to vocals all the time. I don't know. Explain yourselves. Explain yourselves, guys. Another song that really carries forth a lot of momentum and power. I really like the riff that plays in section 2. Just a really cool yet simple riff. A lot of crunchy intervals here as well. Really sounds like something, you know, maybe Judas Priest may have written on Painkiller, which of course, Chuck covered Painkiller. We know he loves that stuff, right? I love singing along to this section as well, especially the, quote, individual thoughts line. Great stuff. The band then moves on into a trem-picked riff, which honestly is very similar to a lot of earlier Death stuff, right? But instead of moving it around to whatever evil, crunchy interval sounds best, it stays firmly in diatonic D minor here. Richard Christy, man, this drum part here in section 3 is just outstanding. He's literally just like dancing on all these cymbals while constantly pushing the 16th note double bass in unison with the guitars. Just such an amazing drum section here. And him and all his crazy cymbal hits and flourishes, he just like plays like an octopus, man. Really give the song a ton of extra rhythmic interest.
Laugh at my words, you fool. They will soon be.
You know, forget just a drummer, man. Richard Christy is his own damn percussion section. Really elevates what otherwise would be a pretty simple and straightforward section like you would hear on some of the earlier Death stuff, right? But here, Richard Christy really elevates this riff. And that's what a good drummer does, right? He elevates simple riffs, which is all Symbolic is, right? Symbolic is a lot of simple riffs that Gene Hoglan elevated, and this is another example of that here. It all builds up into a great big chorus, and man, what a banger of a chorus. So extremely catchy here. I love singing along to this one as the entire song builds up expertly until the last scream of "Will I survive?" Oh man, I just love that scream of Tim's. And I love how it just all drops out on that line too, and you just get this beautiful acoustic guitar starting out the bridge. So beautiful, so somber, so great playing, and more excellent bass work by Steve. This is prog metal done right.
When the link they breathe becomes missing.
I do find the second half of the bridge with the heavy guitars to be, I guess, a bit, I don't know, redundant. We've heard the same thing sort of a few times now. One of the few times in this album, I think they could have just cut a section out, but, you know, I mean, the solo is decent, right? The song then goes on to repeat, and I do love how, all again, it just ends with that big Tim scream. Just such a satisfying way to end. All in all, a great song with a kind of boring midsection right in the middle, which is a shame. But, you know, you got to get in two solos somehow, I guess. Now, lyrically, this song is actually about the internet. Chuck would say so in an interview. Quote, "A tool for good has gone bad. Electric ultra for a new religion. A new way to link, a new way to think. Individual thoughts that have become missing." Quote, end quote. You know, it's funny. Dio pretty much says the same thing on 1991 on Dehumanizer, on Computer God. Made a deep dive on that album similar to this one, which you go check out here. And so here in 1999, Chuck is sort of saying the same thing. And now in 2026, it is all worse than ever. All prophetic words, you know. I do like the subtle throwback to individual thought patterns. That was definitely on purpose. You know, to make it short, the internet was a good thing, but now it's a bad thing, and what will we do when it's gone? You know, not the most subtle or thought-provoking lyrics of all time, but to quote Primus, right, they can't all be zingers. On the whole, though, I do really enjoy the song, and the bridge only slightly diminishes my enjoyment of this track slightly. It's still pretty short. I'll give this song a 9 out of 10. Now, up next, we have Believe. And according to the YouTube music stats, Believe and the follow-up song to this, Cut Down, are actually the lowest streamed songs, which is crazy to me as these are two of my favorites here. Believe begins with a pretty proggy intro, right? Definitely some Dream Theater inspiration here, some Dream Theater worship, but just way heavier and chunkier. Believe has a small little build up intro into the first vocal section here. And this section really sounds like it could have been from like a Nevermore song, and not in a bad way. Now, section 2 then begins with some more trem picking, and I really like when Richard does the synced 16th note double bass, but adds 16th notes on the hi-hat as well. He does this a few times here. And it's a really cool sound that almost sounds like a landslide next to a raging river or something, you know, it's like... Tim Aymar goes through basically all of his voices here in this section as well. And then here we move into another part, which is another section where the album just locks all together. The heavens open up, golden gates appear. Ah!
Let the voice of the soul be free.
Right on that line, right? Let the voice of the soul be free. Dun, dun, dun. Oh man, it's just so good. That might be my favorite moment on the album. So good. So good, especially right with the throwback to The Sound of Perseverance, Voice of the Soul. But more on that when we get to the lyrics here. I like how they sort of go back to the same melody, but different intensity right here as well. It's very interesting in a great proggy way rather than the obtuse, detracting way. Actually, this whole section up into the end of the chorus is just utterly fantastic. Whole thing's just locked in. I love it.
There are things in life worth fighting for.
And I love the descending riffage combined with Tim's great singing. Well, I love that chorus line too of "You must be live." Sorry again. And Tim really sounds great in the song. It's just another small touch, again, that the guitarist played the vocal melody before Tim sings it. They did this a couple times now, and it's such a cool way to make a melody that a vocalist will sing already familiar because you heard it before. Great touch there. I will say though, this song may have like the best minute and a half of the entire album, but this bridge is pretty turgid, honestly just kind of boring. More prog for the sake of prog stuff, I don't really like, honestly. And this song especially suffers from the Chuck song structure. The bridge is so long that it really drags down the song. Sure, the solos are cool, Man, the money here is in the chorus. Again, similar to when the link becomes missing. The bridge section really diminishes my enjoyment of the song, which is a shame, as Death, the bridges often contain some of the best riffs in the song. But here on the Fragile Art, they almost always have these sort of kind of like long held out chords with a solo. Like, I don't know, do something else, do something more interesting. I don't know. It's, you know, I know you're giving room to the solos to breathe and to play, but here, after hearing it again, especially here in the song Believe, just doesn't really work for me. Song repeats as normal. Anyways, lyrically, you heard me mention a few of the lines here, but the song has another direct reference to The Sound of Perseverance. More proof to me that these albums were linked in a purposeful way. Quote, "Let the voice of the soul be free," end quote. Such a triumphant line, delivered and underscored in maybe the best possible way. Absolutely love it. And to me, this song seems to be very, very autobiographical, right? Detailing not only Chuck's belief in a dream, a long goal to be achieved, but also commentary on how others persevere and chase their own goals, right? If I was paid for disappointments, I would be a wealthy man. The magic lives in sincerity and truth behind the thoughts I choose to stand, end quote. Great lyrics here. Here, the belief of Chuck spells out is sincerity. To be sincere is to be yourself. Belief is the magic, right? He details that the belief in a dream may also come with pain and suffering, right? Him being disappointed by others chasing their own dreams and goals that maybe detract and don't work with his, right? It's interesting. It's interesting. And I do think it is an interesting line that Chuck, you know, outwardly puts his disappointments out there into the world too. Like he tells people, yeah, I've been disappointed by many people too, right? That is also a sincere thing to say. Interesting stuff here, right? Quote, "There are things in life worth fighting for, and some things are better off let go. A dream secured long ago or yesterday, close to the top, there's no looking down when you believe," end quote. You must believe, end quote. I love that line, right? There are some things that are better off let go. You know, nothing is worse than seeing someone who cannot let go of their belief in their dream long after the time for that dream has expired, right? And maybe this is him telling himself that too, right? This is what I appreciate about Chuck's lyricism, right? It's hopeful and inspiring, but with a healthy dose of just concrete reality, right? You must let go, but when you're close to the top, you must believe and grasp that goal. Great stuff and a pretty solid song despite the bridge. I'll go Believe with an 8 out of 10, which probably the best chorus on the album. Now, Chuck Schuldiner is the man and musical force driving the entire Control Denied project. And as I mentioned here, these demos earlier are pretty interesting to go back and listen to, as most of these demos, as far back as 1996, pretty much have the songs written exactly as they ended up on the Fragile Art. They're essentially fully complete and written songs, with Chuck demoing basically exactly how he wanted the vocals to sound. So more or less, he had sat on these songs, which, you know, we get to enjoy here now, for potentially 3 years. Like, imagine that, man, right? 3 years is really long and frustrating time to sit on completed music. And I can only imagine how pissed off Chuck was about this, right? It almost feels like he had been completely typecast as a quote death metal guy by the industry, which is made even more clear when Nuclear Blast, you know, required another death record before giving Control Denied a chance. Add in his infamous fallout with Roadrunner Records back in 1995 with Symbolic, and it's no wonder that the next song here, Cut Down, features the venom that it does. So Cut Down is the penultimate track here and one of the shortest on the album, clocking in at just under 5 minutes. Nice, love that. I think if any song should have been made a single or gotten a music video, I think it actually should have been this one here. This is a much sharper and concise and catchy song. It works out really well. It's very angry and venomous too, which starts out right away by getting into the meat of it. No prog intros here like Breaking the Broken, right? Just more or less straight to the riffs. And I really like that opening Chuck solo here. Very, very death flavored with the typical strict fifths Chuck harmonies. Made a video on that as well, before it leads right into the first set of vocals. Now, this song has a ton of groove with it too, along with some really, really interesting and unique picking patterns. It just screams 90s groove metal influence in the absolute best way. And great drumming here by Richard from the first section of the song right until the bridge. He is constantly playing the ride cymbal. But he's changing up the kick and snare patterns playing around it, right? Same use of the ride really does a great job of connecting all the sections together until the chorus. And the drums, and mostly the kick drum, keep increasing in intensity and frequency, right? Which by the time we get to the chorus, he's playing the 16th notes. It really gives the chorus this power, this unstoppable momentum behind it, and connects it, right, by still pedaling that same ride cymbal. Nice little touch by Richard Christie here. Sort of the same way a guitarist can pedal the same note, right? A drummer can do the same thing with the same cymbal. Great stuff by Richard. And Tim Aymar absolutely kills this song as well. Nice harmonies he adds, but really it is him singing this entire chorus in his falsetto scream voice, which sells it for him. His voice really matches the anger and vitriol of the lyrics here too, and similar to the drums, really builds an intensity moving towards the bridge, right? Again, this chorus is one of those sections that everything lines up and locks together, and it opens up to this glorious power prog sound. Like, I get the vision, right? Fantastic stuff. I love this song. The bridge, similar to other songs, does get a little proggy for the sake of prog, but you know, the solo sections and cool little tight syncopated fast sections, you know, it doesn't really take me out of the song all that much. It's also pretty short, right? You know. Not sure if it's the brevity of it all, but this song really just works on all levels for me, and I especially love that second solo section of the bridge. It drastically changes key, but again, for some reason here, it just works just so well, and it does not feel out of place or weird, right? Probably because of that incredible opening line to that solo too. Just, oh man, so sick. Listen. Absolute banger musically. And lyrically, like I said, this is a very, very angry and vicious song. No doubt inspired by Chuck's dissatisfaction with the music industry, record labels, right? But I think more specifically, his incredible animosity and anger towards Roadrunner Records in particular, which I think is all but confirmed with the lyrical throwback to Symbolic, right? With this line, quote, "As you breathe, you abuse the gift of life, inhaling hope into your black heart. No guilt, no shame. Once again, empty words are to blame," end quote, right? Empty words, song from Symbolic, all about empty promises, which I do think was very, very intentional, right? Empty words, the whole song's about it, connects these two, right? But we also get a line very, very similar to the opening line of another really venomous Chuck song, Low Life, right? Off of Spiritual Healing. Quote, "Those who are a waste of life use up air that others could breathe," quote. I love these small little Easter eggs Chuck hides in his songs, and I'm pretty sure he's doing this on purpose, right? Here, Chuck is expressing his total disdain towards record labels. Quote, "I see right through your mind. I know you're kind. I know your game. Surviving on the soul of a song," end quote. You know, he had been around the music industry for over a decade by this point, and he sees how these people feed off others' art, right? Surviving off the soul of a song. What a great metaphor there. I also love the clever chorus lyrics, and of course, right, can't forget the great delivery by Tim, who really sells it. Quote, "You'll be cut down to size when we're all done with you. When you're cut down to size, we will look down on you," end quote. Again, Chuck felt like he had been looked down upon by the record labels, and he proposes this as a people's-led revolution, right? He does not use the first person plural of we all that often. His songs usually feature direct you or I's, but here this indicates that he knows that others feel the same way. Cool stuff, absolute banger of a song, easy 10 out of 10, and maybe my favorite song here. Banger. All right, boys, we are on to the last song here, the title track, and the first thing that I noticed is the guitar tone is like noticeably worse for some reason. Not really sure what happened here. The guitar tone is great on the rest of the album, but here, especially in the opening intro, it just gets so much more fizzy and raw sounding, and not in a good way either. This is exasperated by the intentionally like loose playing of the intro riff. I only say it's intentional because it's clear that if Chuck wanted to, he could have easily played this riff tight. You know, he does it literally later on in the song. It's just like a weird sort of idiosyncrasy of the song. Maybe he did this on purpose. I don't know. We can call it a stylistic choice. Regardless, I really do like this riff. Very simple and direct. And I really like how it's played in triplet field time. Great riff. Another riff of the album contender. The riff is then again highlighted by Richard Christie's just fantastic drumming, right? Doing more of that constant hi-hat flutter. This makes it so groovy and head bobbable. Especially with everything centered around being in triplet time and triplet feel. Great stuff here. And I do appreciate as well them just starting with the riff and getting right into the song. Not often does a nearly 10-minute song do that. You know what I mean? Oftentimes they have longer intros, but nope, here, right to the riff. Great singing by Tim right off the bat. Nice harmonies. And this first vocal section, again, is another one of those stars lineup moments for me on this album.
Just to heal, to allow what's real, to take its course.
However, it's followed up by kind of a weird section, which again robs the song of some momentum. Which on top of that, they put again that strange warbled radio filter on Tim's voice. I don't know why they do that, man. The 90s were so strange for doing stuff like this. This section, though, kind of does remind me of something on a Perennial Quest with sort of like the weird kind of offbeat riffage. But luckily, they don't linger here too much, and they move on to section 3, which once again, things pick up. Some more great singing before once again the band all drops out and an enjoyable Chuck riff leads us right into the chorus. Great singing here again by Tim. Another one of my favorite sing-along moments, and I do enjoy how it's not really a climax or a high point. It almost sounds like low-key and resigned to its fate rather than peaking in energy. The fragile art of existence. Nice musically symbolic for the song. We'll get into that too. One thing I've noticed in contrast to other 90s power prog bands like Symphony X, was a comparison here, Chuck only opens up the song with like long held chords during solo sections rather than vocal choruses getting them. I think that's maybe like a writing habit holdover from Death, but I do think it's rather telling, right? Held power chord choruses are some of my favorite things in power prog, as the contrast from the riffing to the open choruses makes them feel huge and grand, especially on Symphony X. They're like the kings of that. But here on the Fragile Art, the choruses are almost always paired with actual riffs.
It's kept alive.
You know, it's a neat little touch. Maybe it's intentional to not be so typical. I don't know, who knows? Then the floor completely drops out and Tim sings ever so pleasingly of existence, right? It's just so cool. And the band really creates a really gorgeous soundscape here. With the huge chords and drums and these spiraling delayed guitar little leads here and diddles and Tim's spoken words. It really sounds like someone falling into like a deep sea or deep sleep, or perhaps more metaphorically apt for the song, rising towards the light.
No time for self-pity.
Just one of my favorite sections of this entire album. It's just so majestic and spiritual sounding. It is almost like religious and hypnotic with these spiraling guitar lead delays thing, right? Quote, no time for self-pity, no time for dwelling on what should have been, but is yet to be. Mantra-esque lyrics here, which in the context of like the cancer diagnosis and the battle must have not only been surreal and eerie, but maybe a source of courage and inspiration, right? Just fantastic stuff. This is the prog I want to see. Another opens up part of the album here. The band then, in contrast to a lot of other times where their dynamics change greatly in short order, here the band slowly builds it all back up from the bottom, starting with some really tasteful bass lines from Steve, followed by some great, even more tasteful playing from Richard Christie. Again, right, this whole bridge is just so, it's just an exercise in great tasteful musical playing, a real showcase for everyone. You know, despite the fact that they play faster and crazier stuff earlier on, but sometimes simpler, tastier stuff is even more impressive. You know what I mean? Following up that, we then get two absolutely gorgeous and flowing solo sections. Both Shannon and Chuck just absolutely kill it here again, right? They must have saved all their mojo here. And this entire bridge is easily my favorite bridge section in the entire album. It just feels so open, full of hope and triumph. It feels inspiring and resolute. It flows all together extremely well as all the lead guitars are just drenched with delay and chorus. Ah, man, it's just so good, man. And the band underneath, too, grows the music back up to repeat the song in such a natural and flowing way. Great use of the death song structure here in like an actual constructive way rather than detracting from the song. And I love how easily the band transitions back into the repeat of the verse. Expertly crafted stuff. And one last thing music-wise I want to discuss here is I love how they end the song so that it essentially just repeats back into itself. Really, to me, like solidly reinforcing this idea of the fragile art of existence being kept alive by sheer persistence, right? This reincarnation reinforced by these inspiring delays and everything fading out, yet it still comes back, right? It builds itself back up. Amazing stuff. Maybe the most musically complex and refreshing song here. Banger! Now, lyrically, the song is just like truly haunting in a way that's very similar to how eerie it is to see photos of the Twin Towers before the events of 9/11. I hope you guys know what I mean here, right? You know what happens next. So when you see the Twin Towers in the background, you just get this impending sense of disaster or doom, right? Right? And in a way, listening to this album almost kind of feels that same way, right? You know what happens, you know disaster follows, but you almost can't look away and it has this just like weird, I don't know, tangible sense of grief, like baked into it, I guess. I don't know. It's just very, very interesting, this album here too, right? Same place, different time, quote, same place, different time, same chase, a different line. A chance to heal, to allow what's real to take its course, end quote. Here, I think he is speaking on to how even if you are in the same place, right? The time will always change, perspective and how time allows us to heal and to allow what is real, right? Sadness, decay, rebirth, death, to take its course. In a way, once you stop fighting life, right, the passage of time and tragedy of life becomes healing in its own way once you just allow it to happen. Quote, like a brush in hand to paint a picture of what we would like to see and love to be. The vision is clear, taking charge of fear, end quote. Really great, fantastic lyrics here. Again, Chuck is saying, regardless of your own fear, right, you must take charge, paint your own picture, be the artist of your own life. You know, be in charge of your own destiny, so to speak, despite the fear. Quote, for granted, I do not take the future. To be changed by triumph, tears and pain of the past, I gain wisdom. The fragile art of existence is kept alive by sheer persistence. The fragile art of existence. Now, I put all three of these stanzas together as, to me, I could not imagine, you know, reading these lines after a life-altering terminal diagnosis, right? The future can never be so certain that you can take it for granted. However, we do know one thing is for certain, we all have to die. The only thing that is truly here is the present, right? So the future can never be certain, so you cannot take it for granted, whether it be from triumph, the tragedy of your past, right? Present is all that is truly promised to you. What a remarkable line, man. Of course, we have the album title itself, quote, The Fragile Art of Existence, end quote. And man, is that title just ever the stone cold truth, right? Existence is so fragile. We as human beings are born to this chaotic, ever-changing world, and we're just so delicate and fragile despite millions of years of evolutionary pressure trying to protect us. And staying alive alone is truly an art form of its own. Great line, of course, just ever so ironically poignant as well. You know, I'll mention this up in the follow-up video, but almost every interviewer at the time of the album's release asked the same questions about the title, right? It is the elephant in the room. It is impossible to ignore, and I think the gravity of it makes this song just even more fantastic and dramatic because of it, right? Of course, the last lines of the album are in that, you know, fading out, spiraling way. No time for self-pity, no time for dwelling on what should have been, but is yet to be. It is almost like Chuck is speaking to us from beyond, right? While he wrote these words while he was still alive and not even diagnosed with a terminal disease then, right? So it's almost like he was speaking from beyond, from before. He was like grabbing from some other realm of consciousness, deposited this knowledge, not only for us, but maybe for himself. A sort of late manifestation, you know, did his brain subconsciously know about this tumor beforehand and, you know, made him write this song? You know, we may never know, but man, what an exquisite line And what a way to end an extremely serious and dramatic, somber song, given the circumstances to follow it. And what a great way to end the album. You know, simple as. Amazing song, 10 out of 10. I absolutely love this track. So thank you all for staying to the end here. I appreciate all of you. Be sure to leave your thoughts and favorite song. And I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on The Fragile Art of Existence itself musically. Now, stay tuned for part 2. I've been Varvis. Thank you for watching. Let the metal flow. Peace.